You finally stopped waiting, and the moment you did, everything changed. Because the second she senses you've actually moved on, something quietly activates in her that nothing else could. Not your patience, not your explanations, not your love. And what she does next looks a lot like a breakthrough. But if you don't understand what's really happening, it will pull you right back to square one. If you've ever started to heal from someone avoidant, you probably know this feeling. You begin to feel lighter. You stop checking her profile. You make plans that have nothing to do with her. You start sleeping better. You stop replaying old conversations looking for clues. And then, almost on cue, a message, a like on an old photo. Hey, I've been thinking about you. And suddenly, every bit of progress you made feels like it's hanging by a thread. Naturally, your heart accelerates. You think, this is the moment she finally sees me. You start replaying the good times, the moments where it felt real, the version of her that was warm, present, and close. You soften, you respond, and almost without noticing, you're right back where you started, emotionally organized around her, waiting again, hoping that this time will be different. But here's what nobody tells you about that moment. It isn't what it feels like. And if you respond to it the way your emotions are telling you to, you'll restart a cycle that could have finally ended. Here is what most people get wrong about this moment. They think she comes back because she finally realized your worth. They think the distance did its job, and she's had some kind of revelation. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is far more specific. And once you understand it, you'll never misread her last move again. The moment you truly move on, not performatively, not to make her jealous, not as a strategy, but internally, genuinely, completely, something shifts. And she feels it, not because she's watching you closely, but because the emotional signal she'd grown used to receiving simply stops. The quiet background hum of your availability, your hope, your emotional orientation toward her. It goes silent, and that silence is louder than anything you ever said out loud. This is where it starts. Not with your new haircut, not with photos of you having fun, not with a new relationship. What unsettles her is not your new life. It's your calm. Avoidants don't react to threats. They react to emotional indifference. During the entire time you were hurting, hoping, and waiting, her nervous system was comfortable. It knew where you stood. It could predict you. You might have gone quiet for weeks, but underneath that quiet she could still feel the pull, the emotional leaning in her direction. And as long as that pull existed, she could keep her distance without any real cost. The door was always half open because you were always half waiting. She didn't have to choose. She just had to exist, and you'd remain available. But something changed. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped reacting emotionally to her silence. You stopped seeking reassurance through small moves, the checking her profile, the hoping she'd notice your story, the carefully worded message you drafted and deleted. Your energy became neutral. Not cold, not angry, neutral. And to her nervous system, neutral feels like something it has never encountered from you before. It feels like you've left the building, not the physical building, but the emotional one, the one she always assumed you'd stay in. That is when her system registers a shift. Avoidants are comfortable with distance. They have built their entire attachment style around distance being safe. What they are not comfortable with, what they have never actually prepared for, is irrelevance. There is a difference between someone who is far away and someone who no longer has you as an option. She was fine with space. What she was not prepared for was losing access. And access is everything in this dynamic. As long as she had access, meaning she could reach you emotionally whenever she chose, the relationship existed on her terms. She could come close when she wanted warmth and pull back when closeness felt like too much. That is not intimacy. That is control dressed up as independence. The moment access disappears, so does control. And for the first time, she cannot predict you. She sends a signal and doesn't know what comes back. She thinks about reaching out and realizes she doesn't know how you'll respond, or if you'll respond at all. That unpredictability feels like loss. Not because she's suddenly in love in a new way, but because her emotional positioning, the certainty that you were available to her, is gone. This is when anxiety rises. Her emotional safety net disappears. Her fallback option disappears. The dynamic she relied on without fully acknowledging she was relying on it. Gone. And her nervous system, which spent so long running from the pressure of closeness, now finds itself in unfamiliar territory. There's nothing to run from, but there's something missing. And slowly, quietly, that missing thing starts to feel significant. Here's the part that surprises most people. Avoidants don't panic when you leave. They feel relief first. That relief is real, and it lasts longer than you'd expect. Then comes curiosity. Where are you? What are you doing? Why haven't you reached out? Then comes something closer to anxiety, a restlessness she can't quite name. And last, sometimes weeks later, sometimes months, comes a reach out. They panic, not when you leave, but when they realize you're not coming back. And that's when she plays her last card. It rarely looks the way you imagine it would. It's almost never a grand confession or a tearful phone call. It's usually something small enough that she can deny the vulnerability behind it if you reject her. A casual check-in. Hey, just want to see how you've been. A nostalgia trigger. I was thinking about that trip we took. A soft, vague opening. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. Or sometimes a manufactured crisis. Something suddenly goes wrong in her life, and you're the first person she thinks to tell. These moves are not always conscious manipulation. Sometimes they are completely unconscious attempts to reestablish access before the loss becomes permanent. But conscious or not, they serve the same function. They are a test. The test is not whether you still care. The test is whether you are still available. And this is where most people undo everything they built. They feel the reach out and they collapse. They respond with warmth and openness and relief. They think this is finally the moment. They pour back in. And the moment they do, her nervous system exhales. The alarm turns off. The urgency fades. Because she now knows what she needed to know. That the loss wasn't real. That you're still there. That the door is still open. And within weeks, the distance returns. Not because she's cruel, but because nothing changed. The only thing that changed was that she tested the door and found it unlocked. But here is what happens when you've genuinely moved on. When she plays her last card and you don't flinch. When you respond with warmth but without urgency. With presence but without need. Or when you don't respond at all because you simply have somewhere better to be. The dynamic ends for good, not dramatically. Quietly, because you have shown her something she cannot unfeel. That you are no longer organized around her. That her move did not produce the expected result. And that the version of you she kept in reserve, patient, available, emotionally waiting, no longer exists. They don't miss the chaos of the relationship. They don't miss the arguments or the emotional push and pull. What they miss, when they finally let themselves feel it, is the certainty that you were emotionally available to them. That certainty was a real relationship in her mind, not the closeness. The knowing that closeness was available whenever she decided she wanted it. And when that certainty disappears, what's left is the truth she spent the whole relationship avoiding. That she had something real. That she kept it at arm's length. And that she waited too long. An avoidant can handle distance. She has handled distance her whole life. She built herself around it. What she cannot handle, what her entire system has no real defense against, is becoming optional, not rejected, not shut out, optional, the way she made you feel optional without ever meaning to. That is the feeling her last card is trying to undo. And whether or not you let her undo it depends on one thing only. Whether you have genuinely moved on, or whether you're still waiting for her to give you permission to be okay. Because the real shift was never about her. It was about the moment you stopped needing her to come back in order to feel whole. And ironically, completely, that is the only moment she ever truly had a reason to.